Have you ever wondered why, even though we are busy all the time, we often feel a deep emptiness that nothing seems to fill? What is missing when it seems like we are doing everything we are supposed to? We live in a reality that greatly values doing. We are constantly in motion, pursuing goals, chasing after targets, accumulating achievements. But deep down, something essential still seems out of our reach. There is a dimension of ourselves that we often ignore, a dimension that is not involved in action, but in simply being. This duality between the human, conditioned by time, goals, and challenges, and the essential being, who transcends matter and time, is the true central point of our existence. The big issue is that few of us realize that these two dimensions need to coexist in harmony. We are not just what we do, we are also who we are, in the deepest sense of the word. And as we continue to run at the fast pace of modern life, we distance ourselves more and more from this essential dimension. The deeper we dive into doing, the farther we get from being, and the further we feel from this essence, the greater the sense of emptiness becomes. This is where the central question arises. Is it possible to find balance between doing and being? How can we honor our human nature with its needs and challenges without losing connection to our true essence? So today, we will explore this duality more deeply. We will look beyond the surface and uncover the mysteries surrounding doing and being. After all, a life focused only on doing may keep us busy, but does it truly keep us alive? And more importantly, how can we balance these dimensions to live fully, consciously, and in tune with our true essence? Perhaps the answers are closer than you think, waiting for the moment when you are ready to see them. The human dimension is characterized by constant action. From the moment we wake up, we are guided by a series of goals, desires, and expectations. We have objectives to achieve, responsibilities to fulfill, and ambitions to realize. This is the essence of doing, where our focus is always on what has not yet been achieved, on what is to come. Doing defines us as beings conditioned by time, oriented by the past, and driven by the future. This conditioning manifests in all areas of life. From an early age, we learn that success is measured by the number of achievements we accumulate, the goals we reach, and the way we overcome challenges. Society teaches us that we must constantly pursue something, whether it's personal progress, financial stability, or social recognition. But in this relentless race, we often become prisoners of our own desires. Each achievement is followed by a new goal, and the cycle never seems to end. In this scenario, the ego plays a fundamental role. It is the center of our identity in the dimension of doing. The ego is what drives us to act, to compete, to always seek more. And, curiously, it is also responsible for much of the problems we face. The ego strengthens itself by creating challenges, obstacles, and conflicts because this is the ground where it finds its reason for existing. It thrives in chaos, feeding on frustrations and dissatisfactions, always seeking something more to fill the emptiness that, paradoxically, it helps to create. Living in the dimension of doing means constantly being involved in thoughts about what has been and what will be. The past, with its memories, shapes us, while the future, with its expectations, motivates us. But rarely do we realize that in doing this, we lose connection to the present, the only moment where life truly happens. Doing is essential, but when left unbalanced, it can distance us from ourselves, plunging us into an endless and unsatisfactory search. And so, as we remain immersed in doing, we ask ourselves, is it possible to live differently? How can we find harmony between this need to act and the peaceful presence of being? The answer is not in abandoning doing, but in discovering a new way to coexist with it, making room for the awakening of something deeper. Unlike doing, Being is not defined by action, goals, or objectives to be achieved. It is silent, deep, and constant. Being is the pure essence of who we are, that part of us that is beyond time, beyond circumstances, beyond the noise of the world. Being is consciousness in its purest form. It is that state of presence that, at times, we feel in brief moments of tranquility, when the mind stops racing and we find ourselves simply being. There is nothing to do, nothing to prove, nothing to seek, just the state of being fully present. But in the daily rush, being is almost always overshadowed by the constant noise of doing. The mind, conditioned to focus on problems and tasks, rarely allows us to access this space of inner stillness. The curious thing is that, despite being so easily neglected, being is always present, waiting for us to return to it. Amid the chaos of daily life, it is what allows us to pause, breathe, and feel a peace that does not depend on circumstances. Being is not concerned with what happened in the past or what will come in the future. It is rooted in the now, the only reality that truly exists, the present moment. Awakening to this dimension of being is not a process that happens instantly. It is a journey back to our essence, where we rediscover that we are not just the sum of our actions and thoughts, but something much greater. When we access this dimension, we feel a clarity that transcends any logical reasoning. It does not seek answers because it already knows that all the answers are in the simple act of existing. And as we awaken to this dimension, something extraordinary begins to happen. Life, which once seemed like an endless succession of disconnected events, begins to acquire new meaning. Presence brings peace, and this peace allows us to see the world with new eyes, where every moment has its own value. But the question remains, how can we cultivate this dimension amid the pressures and demands of doing? First, you need to understand that it is not about choosing one over the other, but finding a way to integrate them. It is also not about stopping action, but acting with awareness. Doing and being are not opposing forces in conflict. They complement each other, and it is in this union that we find true balance. Modern life conditions us to think that we must always be in motion, producing, achieving, advancing. But this one-sided approach ends up distancing us from our essence and plunging us into a cycle of dissatisfaction. When we can recognize that being is as vital as doing, we begin to live with more presence. It is not necessary to give up our goals and ambitions, but to see that the state of being can coexist with the state of doing, transforming the quality of our actions. This balance begins with the realization that doing can be more conscious, more rooted in the present. Instead of rushing from one task to another, we can bring being into the center of our actions, making each moment an opportunity to connect with the now. Practices like meditation and mindfulness are powerful tools for this process. They teach us to slow down the mind, recognize the repetitive patterns of the ego, and cultivate presence amidst activity. When we practice meditation, for example, we experience moments of inner silence where doing dissolves and being emerges with clarity. When we meditate regularly, we create an internal space that allows doing and being to blend fluidly. Meditation shows us that it is possible to live life actively without losing sight of the tranquility and depth of our essence. Mindfulness, in turn, invites us to be fully present in every moment, even during the simplest activities. Whether walking, working, or interacting with others, mindfulness teaches us to observe, feel, and act with awareness. With this practice, doing ceases to be an automatic movement and becomes a reflection of our true presence. It is in this integration that we discover a new way of living, where action does not disconnect us from being but strengthens it. The harmony between doing and being is not a state that is achieved once and for all. It is a continuous practice that requires attention and intention. Every moment offers the opportunity to align these dimensions, and over time, this integration becomes more natural. And the more we practice this union, the more we feel the benefits in our lives: less stress, more clarity, and a sense of fullness that transcends circumstances. Although the balance between doing and being seems like a promising journey, the path to this integration is not free from challenges. When we begin to awaken to this new consciousness, the ego, which has long dominated our reality, offers resistance. And this resistance is often subtle but powerful. The ego, accustomed to feeding on control, goals, and worries, does not dissolve easily. It clings to old patterns, creating obstacles and distractions that keep us trapped in the dimension of doing. These challenges manifest in various ways. One of the first signs of resistance is constant distraction. Just when we try to slow down, the world around us seems to conspire to keep us busy. The phone rings, notifications on the phone flash, and the demands of daily life seem to multiply. It feels like there is pressure to return to the hustle, to the cycle of tasks and worries. At these moments, the ego whispers that stopping and being present is a waste of time, that there is always something more urgent to do. The problem is that the ego itself creates internal resistance. It strengthens through our emotional reactions and repetitive thoughts. And when we try to connect with being, automatic thoughts, old memories, or fears of the future arise, trying to pull us back into habitual conditioning. The ego thrives on conflict, drama, and suffering because it is there that it feels most real and necessary. And when facing these challenges, we can see that the greatest battle is not external, but internal. Overcoming these resistances requires conscious attention. Instead of fighting against the ego, we must recognize it. The key is to notice when we are being dragged back into old patterns of thought and action. By bringing awareness to these moments, we create a space between automatic reaction and our true presence. It is in this moment that practices like mindfulness are so important. Mindfulness teaches us to observe these impulses without being dominated by them. Instead of being carried away by distraction, we begin to notice what is happening and thus free ourselves. Staying present, especially in situations of conflict or difficulty, can be one of the greatest challenges. In these circumstances, the ego is quick to react, whether with anger, frustration, or anxiety. But it is precisely in these moments that we have the greatest opportunity for growth. When we can remain anchored in being amid chaos, we open the door to profound transformation. Every challenge becomes an opportunity to strengthen our connection to the essential dimension and reduce the ego's influence. But it is necessary to understand that awakening to being does not mean that problems disappear, but that we learn to deal with them in a different way. What once seemed like an endless battle can now be seen as an opportunity to deepen our consciousness. The true practice of balancing doing and being happens exactly in these challenging moments where we are called to respond with presence and clarity, rather than being swept away by the tides of the ego. The awakening process is not linear, but with each resistance overcome, we take another step toward a fuller, more conscious life. Awakening to the dimension of being does not mean living in a constant state of unshakable serenity, where problems cease to exist. On the contrary, challenges continue to arise, and in many cases they may even intensify. The difference lies in how we face them. When we are connected to being, our relationship with challenges changes profoundly. Instead of seeing ourselves as victims of circumstances, we begin to understand that each obstacle carries with it an opportunity to expand our consciousness. The reality is that challenges are inevitable. They are part of the human experience, regardless of the level of consciousness we achieve. But when we awaken to being, we begin to see these moments not as unwanted interruptions, but as invitations to practice presence. Every difficulty, whether external conflict or internal turmoil, carries the potential to take us deeper within ourselves. This is the true meaning of conscious growth, seeing challenges as a chance to broaden our perception and strengthen our connection to our essence. When we are faced with circumstances that trigger our reactivity, such as anger, fear, or frustration, the ego tends to take control. At this point, we can easily be dragged back into the cycle of doing, trying to solve the problem impulsively without stopping to reflect. However, when we give ourselves the chance to observe the challenge with awareness, we realize that it offers an opportunity to practice detachment, to let go of the need for control, and to observe the automatic thought patterns that arise. It is in these difficult moments that being has the chance to grow stronger. This does not mean that pain, difficulty, or suffering disappear, but rather that our relationship with them changes. Instead of resisting, we begin to accept the moment as it is, and in that acceptance, we find a new way to act. A practical example of this is when we face a personal conflict, perhaps at work or in a relationship. The ego naturally wants to defend its position, prove that it is right, and maintain its status. But when we are anchored in the presence of being, a different clarity arises. We no longer feel the need to impose ourselves or react impulsively. We can observe the situation as a whole without fully identifying with the emotions and thoughts that emerge. This broader perspective allows us to act with more wisdom, turning the conflict into an opportunity to expand our consciousness and strengthen our inner peace. Similarly, when we face deep losses or frustrations, being offers us a solid foundation to deal with suffering. Instead of being consumed by pain, we can use this moment to practice radical acceptance. Acceptance does not mean passivity, but the understanding that resistance to reality only creates more suffering. When we accept what is happening, we allow the experience to follow its natural course without adding more layers of pain and suffering generated by the ego's resistance. This is a deep process where we become more aware of our own reactions and consequently freer. Thus, every challenge, big or small, becomes a gateway to expanding consciousness. Facing difficulty with the presence of being gives us the opportunity to transcend it, to learn from it, and to become more aligned with our true nature. This process helps us realize that challenges are an essential part of our growth, and that by dealing with them consciously, we move beyond the ego's limitations and into a higher state of understanding. And when we get used to facing challenges with this new mindset, we realize that life is not about avoiding problems, but about living every experience as an opportunity to deepen our consciousness. The very act of being present, even in the midst of adversity, transforms the way we see the world. We see each moment as an invitation to grow, expand, and awaken even more to the dimension of being. Over time, this continuous practice of presence in the face of challenges leads us to a life of greater serenity, clarity, and above all, purpose. With every breath, with every conscious choice, we get closer to this integration. All we need is to be willing to stop, listen, and notice what has always been there, our essence. Because it is in this connection that we discover a full life. A life where every action is aligned with our deepest truth, where every challenge is an opportunity for growth, and where the simple act of existing becomes the greatest achievement of all. Thank you for embarking on this journey with me. If this video resonated with you, I invite you to like and subscribe to our channel. Share this video with others so they can benefit from this message. And don't forget to leave a comment below sharing your thoughts, reflections, and experiences. Thanks again for watching and for joining me. Take care and see you soon.